Now let's begin. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Max Kent's workshop, casting long shadows across the sawdust-covered floor. He ran his hand along the smooth cherrywood surface of the dining table he'd been building for the past 3 weeks, checking for any imperfections. 15 years as a custom furniture maker had taught him that the details mattered, that patience and precision were what separated good work from great work. "Dad, can I come in?" Tyler's voice called from the doorway leading into the house. "Doors open, buddy." His 12-year-old son stepped into the workshop, careful to avoid the wood scraps scattered near the entrance. Tyler had Max's dark hair, but his mother Caroline's green eyes, and lately he'd been growing into that awkward phase where his limbs seemed too long for his body. "Mom says Grandpa Clyde's coming for dinner tonight." Tyler's voice carried a tension that Max had noticed more frequently over the past few months. Max set down his sanding block and turned to face his son. "That bother you?" Tyler shrugged, but his eyes told a different story. "He's just intense, you know?" "Intense." Max nodded slowly. That was one word for Clyde Sullivan. The man had built a successful real estate empire in their Ohio town, owned half the commercial properties on Main Street, and carried himself with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been told no. When Max had married Caroline 8 years ago, Clyde had made his disapproval clear, though he'd been too politically savvy to cause an open rift. A furniture maker wasn't the son-in-law he'd envisioned for his only daughter. "He likes things his way," Max said carefully. "But this is our house. You're safe here, Tyler. Always." Tyler nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. Before Max could press further, Caroline appeared in the doorway, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing apologetically. "I know, Dad, but Max is working on a commission." "Yes, next week would be better." "Okay, fine. 6 o'clock. She ended the call and sighed. "He's insisting on tonight. Wants to discuss some family matters." Max caught the edge in her voice. "What kind of matters?" "He wouldn't say. You know how he is." Caroline tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd had since they'd met. "Maybe it's about the Henderson property. He's been trying to get you to join his company again. Not interested in pushing paper in some office." Max had turned down Clyde's offers 3 times now. He preferred the smell of wood and the satisfaction of creating something with his hands. Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Clyde Sullivan sat at the head of Max's own handcrafted dining table, acting as though he owned the place. At 62, he still had the build of a man who'd worked construction in his youth before transitioning to buying and selling properties. His silver hair was swept back, and his gray suit probably cost more than Max made in a month. "This table's decent work," Clyde said, running his finger along the edge. "Shame you're wasting your talent on one-offs, when you could be designing furniture lines for my properties. Bulk orders, consistent income." "I like what I do," Max replied evenly. "That's because you're short-sighted." Clyde cut into his steak. "Caroline deserves better than scraping by." "Dad," Caroline started, but Clyde raised his hand. "I'm not criticizing. I'm offering opportunities. There's a difference." He turned his attention to Tyler. "What about you, boy? You thinking about your future? Can't build it on sawdust and dreams." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Grandpa, Dad's work is really good. People come from other states, too. I asked about your future, not your father's delusions." Clyde's voice went cold. "You're almost 13. Time to start thinking like a man." The room fell silent. Max felt his hands clench under the table, but Caroline placed her palm over his knuckles, a silent plea for peace. After dinner, Max retreated to his workshop. He needed to finish sanding the table legs before morning, when his client would arrive for a preview. The rhythmic motion of the sandpaper usually calmed him, but tonight his mind kept replaying Clyde's words, that dismissive tone, the way he spoke to Tyler as if the boy were already a disappointment. He'd been working for maybe 20 minutes when he heard it. A scream. Tyler's scream. High-pitched, terrified, coming from inside the house. Max dropped the sandpaper and ran. His heart hammered as he burst through the door into the hallway. The scream had come from upstairs, from Tyler's room. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his work boots thundering on the wood. Tyler's door was open. What Max saw froze him for half a heartbeat. Clyde had Tyler pinned against the wall, one large hand wrapped around the boy's throat. Tyler's feet dangled 6 inches off the ground, his face reddening as he clawed at his grandfather's arm. Clyde's face was inches from Tyler's, his voice a harsh whisper that carried across the room. If you ever tell your father what you saw, I'll bury you where no one will find you. Do you understand me, boy? Max's vision tunneled. Every protective instinct, every ounce of control he'd maintained over the years of Clyde's subtle insults and manipulations shattered. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Clyde's arm. Let go of my son. His voice came out deadly calm. Clyde turned, and when he saw Max, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not apologetic. Triumphant. Almost pleased to be caught. You heard that? Clyde asked, still holding Tyler against the wall. Max nodded, his grip tightening on Clyde's wrist. Let him go. For a moment, Clyde's smile widened, as if considering whether to refuse. Then he opened his hand, and Tyler dropped to the floor, gasping and coughing. But as Max pulled his son away, Tyler's voice came out strangled and desperate. Dad, check under his bed. The locked room at his house. Check under. Clyde's face went white. Not pale. White as bone, all the blood draining away. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in the 8 years Max had known him, Clyde Sullivan looked afraid. Tyler kept coughing, and Max heard footsteps on the stairs. Caroline appeared in the doorway, her face confused, then horrified as she took in the scene. What's happening? I heard Tyler scream. Your father, Max said, his voice still preternaturally calm, just threatened to bury our son where no one would find him. Caroline's eyes went to her father. Dad? What? It was discipline, Clyde said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. His eyes kept darting to Tyler. The boy was being disrespectful, and I. Get out, Max said. Now wait, just get out of my house. Something in Max's tone must have penetrated, because Clyde actually took a step back. He looked at Caroline, seemed about to appeal to her, then thought better of it. He straightened his jacket with shaking hands. This isn't over, he said, but it sounded hollow. Max didn't respond. He kept his arm around Tyler, waiting until he heard Clyde's footsteps on the stairs, the front door opening and closing, the sound of a car engine starting and fading into the night. Only then did he kneel down to Tyler's eye level. His son's neck already showed the red marks that would turn to bruises. What did you see? Max asked gently. What did he do? Tyler's eyes filled with tears. I went to his house to get Mom's cookbook. The one she left there last week. I knew where he keeps the spare key. I went to his bedroom to see if it was there, and, Dad, the door to his extra room was unlocked. It's always locked. Always. But today it wasn't, and I looked inside, and under the bed there was this box. His voice broke, and Max pulled him close. It's okay. You're safe. He can't hurt you. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't that simple. Clyde Sullivan was wealthy, connected, and Max had just made an enemy of him. Whatever Tyler had seen, it was bad enough that Clyde had threatened a 12-year-old's life. Over Tyler's head, Max met Caroline's eyes. She looked stricken, torn between disbelief and dawning horror. Tyler, Max said quietly, I need you to tell me exactly what was in that box. Max sat in his workshop well past midnight, a cup of cold coffee forgotten beside him. Caroline had finally gotten Tyler to sleep, then retreated to their bedroom without a word. The silence between them was louder than any argument. Tyler's description kept echoing in his mind. A metal lockbox under Clyde's bed, tucked behind old shoe boxes. Inside, photographs. Dozens of them. Young women, girls really, none looking older than 19 or 20. Some were candid shots taken from a distance. Others were closer, more intimate, taken without the subject's knowledge. And beneath the photos, there were other things. A driver's license that Tyler recognized from a news story about a girl who went missing 3 years ago. A silver bracelet with someone's initials. A torn concert ticket stub. Trophies. Clyde Sullivan was keeping trophies. Max had made Tyler describe everything twice, writing it down, memorizing every detail. Then he'd called in a favor from an old friend, Jerome Holden, who worked in the county clerk's office. Jerome owed him for the custom cabinets Max had built at cost when Jerome was renovating his mother's kitchen. I need you to pull some records for me, Max had said, keeping his voice low. Off the books. Can you do that? Depends on what you're looking for. Missing persons reports. Unsolved cases. Going back 10, 15 years. Young women. I'll email you some names. There'd been a long pause. Max, what's this about? I can't tell you yet. But Jerome, if I'm right about this, it's bad. Real bad. Now Max stared at the cherrywood table in front of him, seeing instead Tyler's terrified face, Clyde's white expression when Tyler mentioned the locked room. The way Clyde had threatened his son with the casual certainty of someone who'd made similar threats before and followed through. Max's phone buzzed. A text from Jerome. Got the files. 23 unsolved cases in surrounding counties matching your criteria. Attach PDFs. Max, whatever you're doing, be careful. 23. Max opened the first file, and a young woman's face stared back at him from the missing person photo. Lisa Brennan, age 19, disappeared from a local college campus 7 years ago. Last seen at an apartment complex owned by Sullivan Properties. He opened another file. Then another. A pattern emerged. Most of the missing women had been last seen near properties Clyde owned or managed. Some had been tenants. Others had applied for apartments. One had worked as a receptionist at Sullivan Properties for 3 months before vanishing. Max's hands tightened on his phone. He'd known Clyde was arrogant and controlling, but this was evil. Pure, calculated evil. A soft knock on the workshop door made him look up. Caroline stood in the doorway, wrapped in her bathrobe, her face puffy from crying. Is it true? She asked. What Tyler said. Max gestured to his phone. I think it's worse than what Tyler saw. She walked closer, and he showed her the files. He watched her face as she scrolled through them, saw the moment denial gave way to horrified recognition. That's Jennifer Marks. She pointed to one photo. She interviewed for the property manager position. Dad said she wasn't qualified. That was 5 years ago. Caroline's voice failed. She disappeared 2 days after the interview. Max finished. It's in the report. Caroline sank into the chair across from him. For a long moment, she just stared at the photos of young women who'd smiled for cameras, never knowing they'd become victims of a predator who hid behind suits and real estate deals. We have to go to the police, she finally said. With what? Tyler's description of photographs in an unlocked room? No chain of custody, no physical evidence in our possession. Your father has connections, Caroline. Half the city council owes him favors. The police chief plays golf with him every Sunday. So what do we do? Her voice cracked. Let him get away with it. Max looked at his wife, at the anguish in her eyes, the way she was already pulling away from the father she'd loved and defended for 36 years. Then he thought of Tyler upstairs, sleeping fitfully with bruises on his throat and nightmares waiting behind his eyelids. No, Max said quietly. We don't let him get away with it. But we do this smart. We build a case so airtight that his money and connections won't matter. And we protect Tyler while we do it. How? Max thought about the tables he built, how each piece had to fit perfectly, how patience and precision were everything. He thought about Clyde's arrogance, his certainty that he was untouchable. I need to think. But Caroline, your father threatened to kill our son. He's been doing this for years. He's not going to stop unless someone makes him stop. She nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Time. And trust. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Caroline reached across the table and took his hand. Her palm was cold. He's not my father anymore. I don't know what he is, but he's not my father. Do whatever you have to do. The next morning, Max dropped Tyler at school and made his way to the Sullivan Properties main office. The receptionist, a young woman named Stephanie Ramsey, looked surprised to see him. Mr. Kent, Mr. Sullivan isn't in. I know. I'm here to apologize. Max kept his voice casual, friendly. Things got heated last night. Family stuff. I want to make it right. Stephanie's expression softened. He did seem pretty upset when he came in earlier. He's at the Henderson property site, if you want to catch him. Max drove to the construction site on the edge of town, where Clyde was overseeing the renovation of an old warehouse into luxury apartments. He found the older man standing near a concrete mixer, barking orders at the foreman. Clyde, Max called out. Got a minute? Clyde turned, his face hardening. What do you want? To talk. Somewhere private. They walked to Clyde's Mercedes, parked away from the workers. Max leaned against the hood, keeping his posture relaxed even as his mind raced. Last night got out of hand, Max said. Tyler shouldn't have been snooping in your house, and I overreacted when I saw him against the wall. Clyde's eyes narrowed, searching for the trap. You threatening my grandson was unacceptable, but I understand discipline. Exactly. Max forced what he hoped was a conciliatory smile. You're right that I've been short-sighted. That furniture maker gig, it's not providing the security Caroline and Tyler need. I've been thinking about your offer. The property development position. Yeah, I'm good with my hands. Good at seeing how spaces fit together. Could be valuable. Clyde studied him for a long moment. Max could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Having Max inside Sullivan Properties, under Clyde's thumb, would eliminate a problem and assert dominance. But there was also suspicion there, wariness. This is sudden, Clyde finally said. Tyler's getting older. College isn't cheap. Pride doesn't pay bills. Max met Clyde's gaze directly. And Caroline, she's been stressed. This fight between us isn't helping. I'm willing to make peace if you are. Another long pause. Then Clyde extended his hand. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Max shook it, feeling Clyde's grip try to crush his fingers in a pointless display of dominance. He matched the pressure until Clyde released first. As Max drove away, he caught Clyde's reflection in the rearview mirror. The older man stood beside his Mercedes, watching Max's truck disappear, his expression unreadable. Max pulled over 2 blocks away and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd just shaken hands with a serial predator, smiled at him, played the role of the submissive son-in-law. But he'd also gotten exactly what he needed, access. He pulled out his phone and dialed Russ Fitzgerald's number. Russ owned the hardware store downtown, had known Max since Max had first moved to town. More importantly, Russ's daughter Sarah had disappeared 11 years ago, right after graduating high school. Russ? It's Max Kent. I need to ask you something about Sarah. It's important. There was a heavy silence on the other end. Max, I don't talk about Sarah. You know that. I know. But I think I might have found something. Can we meet? Where? Your store? After you close. And Russ, don't mention this to anyone. Max ended the call and stared at his phone. Jerome's files were still open, 23 faces looking back at him. Sarah Fitzgerald's photo was third from the top. Last seen leaving a party at an apartment complex. An apartment complex owned by Sullivan Properties. He had 3 days before Monday. 3 days to build his case before stepping into Clyde's world. 3 days to figure out how to destroy a monster without becoming one himself. Max started the truck and headed home. He had work to do. Russ Fitzgerald closed the hardware store at 6 p.m. sharp and locked the front door. Max waited in his truck until the lights went out in the storefront, then walked around to the back entrance. Russ opened it before Max could knock, his weathered face creased with lines that hadn't been there 11 years ago. Come in. They sat in the cramped office that smelled of motor oil and dust. Russ poured 2 fingers of whiskey into mismatched glasses and slid one across the desk to Max. Sarah's birthday was last week, Russ said quietly. She would have been 29. I still bought her a card. Tasha thinks I'm crazy, but I can't stop hoping she'll walk through that door someday. Max thought of Tyler, of how he'd felt seeing those bruises on his son's throat. He couldn't imagine 11 years of that not knowing, that hoping against hope. Russ, did Sarah ever mention Clyde Sullivan? The glass paused halfway to Russ's lips. What? I need you to think. Did she ever work for him? Apply for an apartment at one of his properties? Anything. Russ set the glass down slowly. Why are you asking this? Max pulled out his phone and opened the missing persons files. Because I think Clyde's been hurting people. Young women. For a long time. And I think Sarah might have been one of his victims. He watched Russ's face as the older man looked through the files, saw hope and horror war in his expression. When Russ finally looked up, his eyes were wet. Sarah interviewed for a summer property management internship at Sullivan Properties, he said hoarsely. 3 days before she disappeared. She said the interview went well. Said Mr. Sullivan seemed impressed with her, wanted her to come back for a second interview. She never made it to that second interview. Max's stomach dropped. The police never connected it. They asked if she'd had any recent job interviews. I told them about Sullivan Properties. But Clyde had an alibi, had records showing she never came back for the second interview. Said he was sorry for our loss. Russ's hands clenched into fists. Son of a bitch looked me in the eye at her memorial service and told me he hoped they'd find her soon. There's more. Max hesitated, then pulled up Tyler's description from his notes. My son found photographs at Clyde's house. Personal effects. Things that might have belonged to some of these women. Russ stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. You're telling me that bastard killed my daughter and kept trophies? I don't know for certain, but I'm going to find out. Where's Clyde now? You'll do nothing. Max stood too, blocking Russ's path to the door. Listen to me. Clyde has money, lawyers, connections. If you go after him now, he'll bury this and you'll end up in jail. We need to be smart about this. Smart? My daughter is dead, and going to prison won't bring her back. But making sure Clyde pays for what he did, that we can do. If we're careful. Russ's breathing was ragged, but he stopped trying to push past Max. How? I'm going to work for him. Get inside his operation. Find proof that can't be ignored or covered up. That's insane. Maybe, but it's our best shot. Max met Russ's eyes. I need your help, though. Sarah's disappearance, the investigation, anything you remember about those days. Every detail matters. They spent the next 3 hours going through everything Russ could remember. The interview Sarah had mentioned was scheduled for a Saturday, unusual for a business meeting. She'd driven to the Sullivan Properties office building, but never came home. Her car was found 3 days later in a mall parking lot across town. Keys in the ignition, no signs of struggle. Police said she probably ran away, Russ said bitterly. Said teenage girls do it all the time. But Sarah wasn't like that. She had a full scholarship to Ohio State starting in the fall. She was excited. She wouldn't just leave. Max wrote everything down, cross-referencing it with the other cases. Patterns emerged. Most of the women had been alone for their interactions with Clyde. Several had cars found in random locations days later. None of the disappearances had obvious signs of violence or struggle. He's careful, Max said. Probably drugs them, stages it to look like they left voluntarily. By the time anyone realizes something's wrong, the trail is cold. So how do we catch him? We get him on camera or recording admitting to it. We find where he keeps the evidence, the real evidence, not just what Tyler saw. We build a case so strong that even his lawyer friends can't make it disappear. Russ leaned back in his chair. This is going to be dangerous. Yeah. When do we start? Monday. I'm going to work inside Sullivan Properties, see what I can find. I need you to dig into Clyde's past. Property records, business deals, anything that might show where he could be hiding evidence. Can you do that without raising suspicions? I can be discreet. Russ's jaw set in a hard line. Max, if you find proof that he hurt Sarah, if you find her, I'll make sure you know first, Max promised. Before the police, before anyone. You and Tasha deserve that. As Max drove home that night, his phone rang. Caroline's number. Max, where are you? It's almost 10. Just finishing up some things. Be home in 20 minutes. Your phone's been going off. Someone named Andy Morrison called the house 3 times. Said it was urgent. Andy Morrison. Max searched his memory, then remembered. Andy had been one of the contractors who'd worked on a Sullivan Properties development years ago. Max had met him once, briefly, at a Chamber of Commerce event. Did he leave a number? Yeah, I'll text it to you. Max, is everything okay? It will be. I love you. I love you too. Drive safe. Max pulled over and dialed Andy Morrison's number. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. Morrison, this is Max Kent. My wife said you called. Kent. Yeah, I heard through the grapevine you're going to work for Sullivan. That true? Starting Monday. What? There was a long pause. Then Andy said, I worked for Sullivan 5 years ago on the Riverside Apartments project. 6 months in, I found something weird in one of the units. Unit 237. False wall in the bedroom closet led to a hidden space behind it. Like a storage room, but not on any of the building plans. Max's pulse quickened. What was in it? Nothing, by the time I found it. Place had been cleaned out. But there were marks on the walls, scratches, like someone had been locked in there. And a smell, Christ, a smell like. I don't know. Death, maybe. I reported it to Clyde, told him we needed to call the police. He fired me that day. Paid me double my contract if I kept my mouth shut. And you took the money. I had a wife and 2 kids, Andy said defensively. And I didn't have proof of anything. Just a creepy room that could have been explained away. But I never forgot it. And now I hear you're going to work for him? Man, I had to warn you. Sullivan is bad news. I know. Andy, do you remember exactly which unit? You said 237. Yeah. 3rd floor, southeast corner. I don't know if that hidden room's still there, or if he had it sealed up after I found it. But he trailed off. I appreciate the call, Max said. If you remember anything else. There's one more thing. After Sullivan fired me, I saw a girl around the property. Young, maybe 20, 22. She was looking at apartments. I tried to warn her, told her she shouldn't rent there. She laughed it off, Said I was probably just a disgruntled ex-employee. Her name was Lisa something. Lisa. Max thought of the files Jerome had sent. Brennan? Lisa Brennan? That sounds right. Why? You know her. She went missing 7 years ago, Max said quietly. Right after moving into Riverside Apartments. Andy's breathing went ragged. Jesus Christ. I could have done more. I could have. You didn't know? But now we do. Stay by your phone, Andy. I might need your testimony. Max ended the call and sat in his truck, staring at nothing. A hidden room in an apartment building Clyde owned. A room that smelled of death. How many women had Clyde brought there? How many had died in that room, alone and terrified? He thought of Tyler's bruised throat, of Russ Fitzgerald's broken heart, of Lisa Brennan's smiling photo in that missing persons file. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Max spent Saturday building what he privately called the evidence box, a collection of everything he'd gathered so far, organized and documented. He made 3 copies of all the files, encrypting them and storing them in different locations. A safety deposit box Jerome helped him set up, a secure cloud drive, and a physical copy hidden in his workshop. He also upgraded the security on his house. New locks, a camera system disguised as outdoor lights, motion sensors on all entry points. Caroline watched him work with growing unease. You really think he'd come here? She asked. I think he threatened to bury our son where no one would find him, Max replied, drilling a mount for another camera. So yeah, I think he'd come here. That evening, he sat Tyler down for a serious conversation. Caroline listened from the doorway, her arms crossed. Buddy, I need you to understand something. What you saw at Grandpa Clyde's house, what he said to you, it's serious. Really serious. I'm going to be working with him for a little while, and I need you to promise me you'll be careful. Tyler's eyes were older than they should have been. Is he a bad man, Dad? Max thought about lying, about protecting his son's innocence for a few more months. But Tyler had already seen too much, and sugarcoating it would only put him in more danger. Yes, Max said simply. He's a very bad man, and I'm going to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. But while I do that, you need to follow some rules. No going anywhere alone. No answering the door unless Mom or I are home. If anyone asks about what you saw at Grandpa's house, you don't remember the details. Can you do that? I'm not scared of him, Tyler said, but his voice shook slightly. Max pulled his son into a hug. Being scared is smart. Fear keeps you alert. But you're also a Kent, and Kents don't back down from bullies. We're going to get through this together. What if he hurts you? 0.3s. He won't. Max pulled back to look Tyler in the eye. Because I'm smarter than him, and I'm not going to give him the chance. On Sunday, Max made one final call. Patrick Forbes was a private investigator who specialized in background checks for local businesses. Max had built custom cabinets for Patrick's office 2 years ago, and they'd stayed in touch. I need a favor, Max said, and it needs to stay completely off the books. I'm listening. Clyde Sullivan. I need you to pull everything you can find on him. Financial records, property transactions, criminal history, if any, known associates. Everything. Patrick whistled low. Sullivan's a big fish, Max. If he finds out I'm digging, he won't. And Patrick, there's 23 missing women who might be connected to him. 23 families who deserve answers. Silence. Then 23. At least. Probably more. Jesus. Okay. Give me a week. But Max, if this is what I think it is, you need to be careful. Men like Sullivan don't go down easy. I know. That's why I need every piece of ammunition I can get. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Max stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He'd had to buy one yesterday, hadn't worn one since his wedding, and tried to see himself as Clyde would see him. Submissive, grateful for the opportunity. Controlled. You look like you're going to a funeral, Tyler said from the doorway. Feels like it. Max turned to face his son. Remember what we talked about? Stay alert. Trust nobody. Come straight home after school. Tyler grinned weakly. You sound like a spy movie. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. Max ruffled Tyler's hair. I'll pick you up from school today. Wait inside if I'm late. The Sullivan Properties office occupied a renovated Victorian mansion on Main Street, all brass fixtures and polished wood. Stephanie Ramsey greeted Max with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Sullivan's expecting you. 3rd floor, corner office. Max climbed the stairs, taking in every detail. Security cameras in the corners, high-end locks on the offices, everything expensive and designed to impress. Clyde's office was exactly what Max expected. Oversized desk, leather chairs, walls covered with photographs of Clyde shaking hands with local politicians and business leaders. Clyde himself sat behind the desk, already working despite the early hour. He looked up as Max entered, his expression unreadable. "You're early. Good. Sit." Max sat. "Thank you for this opportunity. Don't thank me yet. You're starting at the bottom. Property inspections, maintenance coordination, tenant complaints. You'll work with Rich Shepard, our property manager. He'll show you the ropes." Clyde slid a folder across the desk. "Sign these." Max opened the folder. Employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality clauses. His eyes caught on one phrase. Employee agrees not to discuss or disclose any information regarding Sullivan Properties or its owner without express written permission. Seems excessive for a property manager position, Max said carefully. "I value discretion. Some of our clients are high profile. They expect privacy." Clyde's eyes never left Max's face. "Problem?" "No problem." Max signed without reading further. He'd have Patrick review the contract later, but right now, getting inside Sullivan's operation mattered more than whatever legal trap the paperwork might contain. "Rich will meet you downstairs. He'll take you to Riverside Apartments first. We're renovating several units." Clyde leaned back in his chair. "Max, let's be clear about something. You're here because Caroline asked me to give you a chance, and because I believe in second chances. But if you screw this up, if you cause problems, or make me regret this decision, you're gone. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Now get out." Max found Rich Shepard waiting in the lobby. Rich was maybe 45, balding, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and stopped caring. He barely glanced at Max before heading for the door. "Let's go. We've got 12 properties to check today." They drove to Riverside Apartments in Rich's company van. The complex was newer than most of Sullivan's properties, maybe 8 years old, with 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape around a courtyard. Rich droned through the basic information. 84 units total, average occupancy rate 92%, mostly young professionals and college students. You'll handle complaints, schedule repairs, collect rent from anyone who doesn't pay online. It's boring work, but it pays. Rich pulled a key ring from his pocket. Unit 237 is vacant. Needs painting and new carpet. We'll start there. Max's pulse jumped. Unit 237. Andy Morrison's unit, the one with the hidden room. He followed Rich up to the 3rd floor, maintaining a bored expression even as his mind raced. The unit was typical, small living room, galley kitchen, single bedroom, bath. But the bedroom closet made Max's skin crawl. It was deeper than it should be, and when Rich stepped inside to check the dimensions, Max noticed something. The back wall sounded hollow. "Rich, you mind if I take some measurements?" Max pulled out his phone. "I want to familiarize myself with the unit layouts." "Knock yourself out. I'll be outside having a smoke." The moment Rich left, Max examined the closet wall more carefully. It looked solid, but when he pressed on specific points, he felt slight give. There had to be a release mechanism, but he didn't have time to find it now. He took photos from every angle, noting the seams that were just slightly off, the way the wall was a fraction of an inch recessed from the sides. And he had been right. There was definitely a hidden space here. Rich returned reeking of cigarettes. "Done." "Yeah. What happened to the last tenant?" "Moved out." Rich's tone made it clear he didn't care enough to elaborate. They spent the rest of the day visiting other properties. Max kept mental notes of everything: security systems, access points, which buildings had cameras and which didn't. By the time Rich dropped him back at his truck, Max's head was spinning with information. "You'll do," Rich said grudgingly. "Most newbies can't keep up. See you tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp." Max drove to pick up Tyler, then swung by his workshop instead of going straight home. He downloaded the photos from his phone and studied them on his computer, zooming in on the closet wall seams. "What are you looking at?" Tyler asked, appearing at his shoulder. "Just work stuff. That's Grandpa's apartment building. I recognized the lobby from his Christmas party last year." Tyler pointed at one photo. "Why are you taking pictures of a closet?" Max closed the laptop. "I can't tell you everything yet, buddy. But I promise, when this is over, I'll explain. For now, you need to trust me." "I do trust you, Dad." Tyler hesitated. "Is this about what I saw? In the box?" "Yeah." "Good. He deserves whatever you're planning." The certainty in Tyler's voice, the lack of mercy, worried Max. His 12-year-old son shouldn't have that kind of hardness in him. But Clyde had put it there with his threats and his hands around Tyler's throat, and Max couldn't undo that damage. He could only make sure Clyde never hurt anyone again. That night, Max called Patrick Forbes from his workshop. "I need you to add something to your research. Riverside Apartments, specifically Unit 237. I need to know who lived there over the past 5 years, when they moved in, when they moved out, and if any of them filed complaints or police reports. That's going to take some digging. I've got time. Just don't leave a trail." After hanging up, Max opened his evidence file and added photos from the day. The hidden room in 237, the layout of Riverside security, the employee contract with its aggressive confidentiality clauses. Piece by piece, he was building something. He just hoped it would be enough. 2 weeks into his job at Sullivan Properties, Max had developed a routine. Morning property inspections with Rich, afternoons handling tenant complaints and coordinating repairs, evenings in his workshop organizing what he'd learned. He was careful never to seem too interested in any one property or too curious about Clyde's personal business. But he was learning. Clyde owned 18 properties across 3 counties. Most were apartment complexes, but there were also a few commercial buildings and 2 vacant warehouses on the edge of town. Max noted that Clyde personally handled anything related to the warehouses, never delegating those inspections to Rich or the other property managers. He also learned that Stephanie Ramsey, the receptionist, wasn't just answering phones. She scheduled all of Clyde's personal appointments, including several weekly meetings that weren't listed on the company calendar. When Max casually asked about them, she'd gotten defensive. "Mr. Sullivan's private meetings are none of your concern." Max had backed off, but he'd started watching Stephanie more closely. She seemed nervous around Clyde, flinching when he raised his voice, staying late most evenings even when there was no obvious work to complete. Either she was deeply loyal or deeply afraid. Max suspected the latter. On Thursday of the second week, Rich called in sick. Clyde personally assigned Max to handle emergency maintenance at one of the older apartment buildings on the south side. Unit 102, water leak. Tenants threatening to call the housing authority if it's not fixed today. Get it done. Max grabbed the company van and his toolkit, grateful for the chance to work alone. But when he arrived at the building, Oakmont Apartments, another Sullivan property, he recognized the address from one of Jerome's files. Abigail Neal had lived here before disappearing 6 years ago. The current tenant, an elderly woman named Martha Gill, let him in and showed him the leak under her kitchen sink. "Been trying to get this fixed for weeks," Martha complained. "That property manager, Rich, kept saying he'd send someone. Never did. I'll take care of it." Max knelt to examine the pipes. Simple fix, just a worn washer. While he worked, he asked, "How long have you lived here?" 8 years. Used to be a nice place, but it's gone downhill. People moving in and out all the time now. No stability. Did you know a girl named Abigail Neal? She lived here about 6 years ago." Martha's face softened. "Abby? Sweet girl. Had the apartment next door, 103. Always said hello, helped me carry my groceries sometimes. Such a shame what happened." Max's hand stilled. "What happened?" "She disappeared. One day she was here, next day gone. Police came asking questions, but nobody knew nothing. Her mama still comes by sometimes, leaves flowers by the mailboxes." Martha shook her head. "This neighborhood, things happen. Girls gotta be careful. You ever see her with anyone? Boyfriend, maybe?" "Nah." Abby kept to herself mostly. "Though I did see Mr. Sullivan here a few times toward the end. Said he was checking on the property, but he seemed real interested in Abby's apartment specifically." Max's pulse quickened. "Did you tell the police that?" "Course I did. They said Mr. Sullivan had every right to check on his property, wasn't suspicious." Martha snorted. "Lot of good those cops did. City's full of rich men getting away with whatever they want." Max finished the repair and stood. "Mrs. Gill, I need you to think carefully. Those times you saw Mr. Sullivan here, did he go into Abby's apartment?" "Few times, yeah." Said something about inspections. Martha studied Max's face. "Why you asking all these questions? You some kind of detective?" "No, ma'am. Just curious." Max handed her his card, a work card with his cell number written on the back. "If you remember anything else about Abby, or about Mr. Sullivan being here, would you call me? It's important." Martha took the card slowly. "You think something bad happened to Abby, don't you? I think she deserves to have her story told properly." As Max drove back to the office, his phone rang. Patrick Forbes. Got some interesting information on Sullivan. You sitting down? I'm driving. Talk to me. Clyde Sullivan's financials are weird. He's got money coming in from his properties, sure, but there's also cash deposits that don't match any business income. We're talking 30, 40,000 deposited every few months, always in cash, always structured just under the reporting threshold. Blackmail? Max suggested. Maybe. Or payoffs. I also found something interesting in his property records. He owns those 2 warehouses you mentioned, but they're registered under a shell company. Different name, but he's the sole owner. And get this, the utility bills for those warehouses are astronomical. Way more than you'd need for empty buildings. Meaning they're not empty. Bingo. Whatever he's doing there, he's using a lot of electricity. Max thought of the hidden room in 237, of Clyde's careful selection of properties, of young women disappearing without a trace. Patrick, I need you to get me inside one of those warehouses. Are you insane? If Sullivan finds out. He won't. Not if we're careful. Can you get me blueprints? Alongside? I'll see what I can do. But Max, whatever you find in there, you need to take it straight to the FBI. This is beyond local police jurisdiction. I will. I just need proof first. That evening, Max met with Russ Fitzgerald at the hardware store again. Russ looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 2 weeks since they'd last spoken. My wife's been asking questions, Russ said, about why I've been so distracted. I can't tell her, Max. If I tell her, we might have a lead on Sarah, and it turns out to be nothing. His voice broke. I understand. Max pulled out his laptop and showed Russ the photos from Unit 237, the notes from Martha Gill, Patrick's financial findings. But it's not nothing. Clyde's been hunting these women for years, probably decades. He's got places he takes them, places he keeps evidence. We're getting close. How close? I'm going to search one of his warehouses this weekend. Patrick's getting me floor plans and security details. Russ leaned forward. I'm coming with you. No. Max, my daughter. Is why you can't come. Max's voice was firm but gentle. If we get caught, if Clyde presses charges, I need you on the outside. Someone he can't intimidate or silence. Someone who can go to the FBI with everything we've found if I disappear. Disappear? Russ's face went pale. You think he'd kill you? I think he's killed 23 women that we know about. I think he threatened a 12-year-old child. I think he's dangerous, smart, and desperate to protect his secrets. So yeah, if he catches me, I don't like my odds. Max pulled a flash drive from his pocket. This has copies of everything. All the files, all the evidence, all my notes. If something happens to me, you take this to the FBI field office in Columbus. Not the local cops. The FBI. You ask for the missing persons division and you tell them everything. Russ took the flash drive with shaking hands. Max, I'm not planning on anything happening. But plans don't always work out. Max stood. One more thing. Keep an eye on Caroline and Tyler for me. If Clyde suspects I'm onto him, he might try to use them as leverage. You think he'd hurt his own daughter? Max thought of Clyde's face when Tyler mentioned what was under the bed. Thought of how quickly Clyde had turned violent with a 12-year-old. I think he'd hurt anyone who threatened to expose him. Saturday morning, Max told Caroline he needed to handle some emergency maintenance at one of the properties. She didn't question it. She'd been distant lately, struggling to reconcile the father she'd known with the monster Max was uncovering. Tyler's at a friend's house, she said. Should I pick him up, or will you? You pick him up. I'll be home by dinner. He kissed her, perhaps holding on a moment longer than necessary, then drove to meet Patrick Forbes in a grocery store parking lot 2 towns over. Patrick handed him a folder through the truck window. Warehouse blueprints, alarm codes. Those might be out of date, and photos of the exterior from a few days ago. The place has cameras, but they're old and the coverage isn't great. Blind spot on the west side near the loading dock. Max studied the blueprints. The main warehouse floor was large and open, but there were smaller rooms along one wall. Office space, maybe, or storage. Any idea what he's using it for? Officially? Climate-controlled storage. He rents some space to local businesses for inventory overflow. But those electricity bills suggest he's running something more than a few dehumidifiers. Max folded the blueprints carefully. Patrick, after today, you're done. Whatever happens, you don't know anything about this. Max, be careful. Men like Sullivan don't leave evidence lying around. I'm counting on his arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable. The warehouse was on the industrial side of town, surrounded by other storage facilities and shipping depots. Max drove past twice, noting the camera positions, the locks on the doors, the complete absence of any other people or vehicles. It was afternoon on a Saturday. The businesses here operated Monday through Friday only. He parked his truck a block away and walked back, staying in the camera blind spots Patrick had identified. The loading dock door's lock was newer than the others, high security. Max was good with his hands, but not a locksmith. The side door was older, though, with a standard deadbolt. Max pulled out his lock-picking tools. He'd learned the skill years ago out of curiosity, never imagining he'd use it for breaking and entering, and worked the lock for 3 tense minutes before it clicked open. The warehouse interior was dim, lit only by dusty windows near the ceiling. Rows of storage units lined the main floor, each secured with padlocks. But Max's attention went immediately to the offices along the back wall. 3 doors, all closed, one with a much newer lock than the others. He approached the door with the new lock and examined it closely. No windows, reinforced frame. The lock itself was commercial grade. Whatever was behind this door, Clyde wanted it very secure. Max had brought bolt cutters for the storage unit padlocks, but they'd be useless against this lock. He was about to try the lock picks when he heard something. A voice, faint, coming from beyond the door. Female, saying something he couldn't make out. Max's blood froze. He pressed his ear to the door and heard it again. Definitely a voice, maybe crying. Someone was in there. Someone was alive. He abandoned caution and kicked the door hard, right next to the lock. The frame splintered but held. He kicked again, throwing all his weight behind it. The frame gave way with a crack like a gunshot. The room beyond was dark, but Max's eyes adjusted quickly. It was maybe 15 by 15 feet, with a cot in one corner, a camping toilet, and a girl huddled against the far wall. She looked maybe 19, emaciated, terrified, her hair matted and dirty. "It's okay," Max said, keeping his voice low and calm despite his racing heart. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Max. I'm here to help." The girl stared at him with wild eyes. "He said no one would find me. He said he'd kill me if I screamed." "Who said that?" But Max already knew. He pulled out his phone and called 911. "This is an emergency. I'm at 1847, Industrial Drive, the Sullivan Properties warehouse. There's a girl here who's been imprisoned. I need police and an ambulance immediately." The dispatcher started asking questions, but Max cut her off. "Just send them. Now." He turned to the girl. "What's your name?" "Kelly. Kelly Barrett. He took me 3 weeks ago. I was looking at an apartment, and he offered to show me another property, and then..." She started crying. Max's mind raced. Kelly Barrett. He hadn't seen her name in the missing persons files, but 3 weeks wasn't long. The search would still be active, her family still hoping. "Kelly, I need to take some photos as evidence. Is that okay?" She nodded, and Max documented everything. The room, the makeshift prison, Kelly herself. Then he heard sirens in the distance. "The police are coming. You're safe now. But Kelly, I need you to tell them everything. Every detail about who took you, what he did, where he brought you. Can you do that?" "It was Mr. Sullivan," Kelly said. "Clyde Sullivan. He owns the apartment building where I applied. He seemed so nice at first." The sirens got louder. Max heard tires on gravel, car doors slamming. He stepped out of the room with his hands raised as police officers burst through the door he'd broken earlier, guns drawn. "Hands up." On the ground. Max complied immediately, dropping to his knees with his hands behind his head. "There's a girl in that room. Kelly Barrett. She needs medical attention. The man who imprisoned her is Clyde Sullivan." 2 officers moved past him toward the room, while another kept his gun trained on Max. "What's your name?" "Max Kent. I work for Sullivan Properties. I found her by accident while checking inventory." It was a lie, but it would hold up better than admitting he'd broken in deliberately. The officer's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, one of the officers from the room called out. "We've got her. She's alive. Get the EMTs in here." Paramedics rushed past, and Max heard Kelly's voice, sobbing in relief. He stayed on his knees, hands behind his head, while the officers secured the scene. Finally, a detective arrived, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She looked at Max, at the broken door, at the room beyond. "I'm Detective Lynette Charles. You want to tell me what really happened here?" Max met her eyes. "Clyde Sullivan has been abducting young women for years. Maybe decades. Kelly Barrett is just the most recent victim. There are at least 23 unsolved missing persons cases connected to his properties, and I can prove it. Detective Charles studied him for a long moment. That's a serious accusation. I have documentation, files, evidence. And now you have Kelly, who can identify him as her abductor. Where's Sullivan now? I don't know, but he owns properties all over the county. If he finds out Kelly's been found, he'll run or destroy evidence. You need to move fast. Detective Charles pulled out her radio. Get me a warrant for Clyde Sullivan's arrest and search warrants for all Sullivan Properties locations. Suspicion of kidnapping and false imprisonment. And someone finds Sullivan. I want eyes on him before he hears about this. She turned back to Max. You're coming to the station. We need your full statement and all that evidence you mentioned. Max nodded. As the officers helped him to his feet, he saw Kelly being loaded into an ambulance. She looked at him through the open doors, and he saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. The interrogation room at the police station was exactly like Max had seen in movies. Gray walls, metal table, observation window. Detective Charles sat across from him with a digital recorder between them. Start from the beginning, she said. Everything. Max did. He told her about Tyler finding the box under Clyde's bed, about the photographs and personal effects. He told her about the 23 missing women Jerome had identified, about the pattern of disappearances near Sullivan Properties. He told her about Andy Morrison's discovery of the hidden room in Unit 237, about Martha Gill seeing Clyde at Abigail Neal's apartment before she vanished. Then he pulled out the flash drive from his pocket. This is everything. All the missing persons files, property records, financial irregularities, witness statements. I've been building this case for 2 weeks. Detective Charles took the flash drive. You should have come to us immediately when your son found that evidence. Would you have believed me? A father-in-law who doesn't like me. A son who allegedly saw some photos in an unlocked room? No physical evidence. No victims coming forward. Max shook his head. Clyde Sullivan owns half this town. He has the police chief's personal cell number. I needed ironclad proof before I could risk him being warned and destroying everything. So you broke into his warehouse. I was checking inventory for work, Max said, maintaining the lie. The door wasn't properly secured. The door was kicked in. It was damaged. I thought I heard someone inside and was concerned about intruders. Detective Charles almost smiled. You're a terrible liar, Mr. Kent. But you also just saved Kelly Barrett's life, so I'm inclined to overlook your breaking and entering. She stood. Wait here. I need to review this evidence and coordinate with the FBI. FBI. Multiple missing persons across state lines. Potential serial predator? This is federal jurisdiction now. But don't worry, I'm not letting them push me out completely. I want Sullivan in a cell, and I want to be there when we put him in it. She left, and Max sat alone with his thoughts. He'd found Kelly, one living victim who could testify against Clyde. But what about the others? What about Sarah Fitzgerald and Abigail Neal and Lisa Brennan and the 20 others whose faces haunted him? His phone buzzed. A text from Caroline, Tyler's home. Where are you? News is saying something about a rescue at a warehouse. Please tell me you're okay. Max typed back. I'm fine. At police station giving statement. We'll explain everything when I get home. I love you. An hour later, Detective Charles returned with a man in a dark suit. FBI badge clipped to his belt. Mr. Kent, this is Special Agent Art Terry from the FBI's Missing Persons Division. He'll be taking over the investigation. Agent Terry sat down and pulled out a tablet. I've reviewed your evidence, Mr. Kent. It's impressive work. But I need to ask, why didn't you come to us sooner? Same reason I gave Detective Charles. I needed more than suspicions and circumstantial evidence. You also wanted revenge, Agent Terry said bluntly. Your son was threatened. You wanted to make Sullivan pay. Max didn't deny it. I wanted justice. For Tyler, for those missing women, for their families. If that's revenge, then yes, I wanted revenge. Agent Terry nodded slowly. Kelly Barrett is being treated at the hospital. She's given a preliminary statement, and it corroborates everything you've told us. We've secured warrants for Sullivan's arrest and for searches of all his properties, including his home. Have you found him? Not yet. His car is gone from his house, and he's not answering his phone. We have alerts out, but... Agent Terry leaned forward. Mr. Kent, if Sullivan contacts you, if he reaches out in any way, you need to call me immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Men like Sullivan are most dangerous when cornered. Understood. One more thing. We'll need you to stay available for additional questioning. Don't leave town. Max stood. Can I go home now? Yes. But Mr. Kent. Agent Terry's expression softened slightly. What you did today, finding Kelly Barrett, you saved her life. A lot of cops work their whole careers and never get that satisfaction. You should be proud. But as Max walked out of the police station into the evening air, he didn't feel proud. He felt exhausted, worried, and aware that this wasn't over. Clyde was still out there somewhere, and Max had just exposed him to the world. His phone rang as he reached his truck. Unknown number. Hello. You sanctimonious bastard. Clyde's voice was cold, controlled fury. You think you've won? Max's heart hammered. Where are you, Clyde? Somewhere you'll never find me. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your FBI friends and tell them you made a mistake. Tell them Kelly Barrett is lying, that she's mentally unstable, that I had nothing to do with her disappearance. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, Caroline dies. I'm watching your house right now, Max. Such a pretty home you've built. Such a lovely family. Would be a shame if something happened to them. Max's blood turned to ice. If you touch them, you'll what? Come after me. You're 40 minutes away, Max. I'm right here. So here's what you're going to do. You call the FBI, you recant everything, and maybe, I'll let your family live. The line went dead. Max ran to his truck, dialing Caroline as he started the engine. She answered on the third ring. Max, did you see the news? They're saying you found a. Caroline, listen to me carefully. Get Tyler and go to the Fitzgerald's house right now. Don't ask questions, don't pack anything. Just grab Tyler and go. What? What? Your father just threatened to kill you. He's watching the house. You need to leave now. Silence. Then, in a voice Max barely recognized. Okay. We're leaving now. Stay on the phone with me. I'm calling the police on my other phone. Max dialed 911 with his other hand, while keeping Caroline on the line. He explained the situation to the dispatcher, gave his address, demanded immediate response. Then he called Agent Terry. Sullivan just called me. He's at my house, threatening my family. We're sending units now. Stay where you are. Like hell I'm staying here. Max was already doing 70 on the highway, weaving through traffic. That's my wife and son. Mr. Kent, if you confront Sullivan, you could compromise. Max ended the call. On his other phone, he heard Caroline's voice, tense and scared. We're in the car. Tyler's with me. Max, I see headlights behind us. Is it following you? I don't know. Maybe. It turned when I turned. Drive to the police station. Don't go to the Fitzgeralds. Stay in populated areas. Max pushed the truck faster, the engine roaring. His house was still 20 minutes away, but if Clyde was following Caroline, if he caught her. Max, the car's getting closer. It's a Mercedes. It's him. Run the red lights if you have to. Get to people. Get to witnesses. He heard Tyler's voice in the background, scared. Mom, he's right behind us. Then Caroline screamed. Max heard the crash through the phone, the crunch of metal, the shriek of tires, Caroline's cry of terror. Then nothing. Caroline. Caroline. Static. Then Tyler's voice, shaky and small. Dad? Mom's hurt. The car. He rammed us. We're in a ditch on Old Mill Road. Tyler, listen to me. Can you get out of the car? I think so. My door opens. Get out and run. Hide. Don't let him see where you go. What about Mom? Max heard Clyde's voice through the phone, distant but clear. Come out, boy. Time we finished our conversation. Tyler, run now. Max heard his son's door open, heard footsteps running, heard Clyde cursing. Then the phone went dead. Max called 911 again, gave the location on Old Mill Road, demanded ambulance and police. Then he drove faster than he'd ever driven in his life, running stop signs and red lights, his mind filled with images of Caroline hurt and Tyler hiding from a monster. When he finally reached Old Mill Road, he found it lined with police cars and an ambulance. Caroline's car was indeed in a ditch, the passenger side crumpled where Clyde's Mercedes had struck it. EMTs were loading Caroline onto a stretcher, and Max saw blood on her face. Caroline. He tried to run to her, but a police officer stopped him. Sir, you need to. That's my wife. Let me through. Agent Terry appeared. Let him go. Max ran to the ambulance. Caroline's eyes were open, focused on him with desperate intensity. Tyler, she whispered. Find Tyler. I will. I promise. The The EMTs closed the ambulance doors, and Max turned to Agent Terry. "Where's my son? Where's Clyde? We're searching the woods. Sullivan's car is gone, but there are footprints leading into the tree line. We've got dogs coming." Max didn't wait for permission. He ran toward the woods, calling Tyler's name. Behind him, he heard Agent Terry shouting orders, heard more officers joining the search, but all Max could think about was his 12-year-old son alone in the dark with a killer. "Tyler!" He crashed through underbrush, his eyes scanning the darkness. It was full night now, the moon hidden behind clouds. He pulled out his phone and used the flashlight, sweeping it across trees and shadows. A sound. To his left. Max turned and saw him. Tyler was pressed against a tree, trying to make himself small. And 10 feet away, clearly stalking toward him, was Clyde Sullivan. Max didn't think. He charged. Clyde heard him coming and spun, but Max was already there, tackling him to the ground. They rolled across dead leaves and exposed roots, and Clyde got his hands around Max's throat, squeezing. "Should have accepted my offer," Clyde hissed. "Should have known your place." Max couldn't breathe, black spots dancing in his vision. But he remembered 15 years of working with wood, of swinging hammers and lifting boards, of building furniture that lasted generations. He was strong. Stronger than Clyde gave him credit for. He drove his elbow into Clyde's ribs, and the grip loosened. Max sucked in air and rolled, pinning Clyde beneath him. He drew back his fist. "Dad, don't." Tyler's voice cut through the red haze of fury. "Don't kill him. You're not like him." Max's fist hovered inches from Clyde's face. The old man looked up at him with hateful eyes, blood trickling from his nose. "Do it," Clyde taunted. "Prove you're no better than me." Max thought of Kelly Barrett in that warehouse prison. He thought of Sarah Fitzgerald and Abigail Neal and 21 other women whose families deserved answers. He thought of Tyler watching him right now, learning what kind of man his father was. He lowered his fist. "You're going to rot in prison," Max said quietly. "Every day for the rest of your miserable life. You're going to remember that you were caught by a furniture maker you looked down on. You're going to remember that you failed." Flashlights cut through the trees. Police officers emerged, guns drawn, and Max stood slowly, his hands raised. They swarmed Clyde, forcing him to the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back. Agent Terry appeared beside Max. "Good choice. If you'd hit him, his lawyers would have made you the villain." Max barely heard him. He turned to Tyler and pulled his son into his arms, holding him so tight it probably hurt. Tyler was crying, great heaving sobs, and Max felt his own tears finally break free. "It's over," Max whispered. "It's over, buddy. He can't hurt us anymore." They stood like that for a long time, father and son in the woods, while police led Clyde Sullivan away in handcuffs. And for the first time in weeks, Max felt like he could breathe. The next 2 weeks were a blur of statements and interviews and news coverage. The story broke wide. Furniture maker uncovers serial predator. Local real estate mogul arrested in multiple kidnappings. Victim found alive after 2-week search. Kelly Barrett's testimony was damning. She described in detail how Clyde had lured her to the warehouse under the pretense of showing her another apartment, how he'd drugged her coffee, how she'd woken up in that locked room. The FBI found evidence in the warehouse that connected Clyde to at least 8 other women, including Abigail Neal. DNA evidence. Belongings. And in the hidden room behind Clyde's bed at his house, the room Tyler had found, they discovered his sick documentation of everything. Photographs, identification, items taken from each victim. Sarah Fitzgerald's driver's license was among them. Max was the one who told Russ, standing in the hardware store after hours while Russ cried for the daughter he'd lost 11 years ago. The FBI had found Sarah's body on property Clyde owned upstate, buried in a remote location. At least she could have a proper funeral now. At least her family knew. Caroline's injuries were serious, but not life-threatening. A concussion, broken ribs, various bruises. She'd been released from the hospital after 3 days. The emotional wounds would take longer to heal. She'd lost her father twice. Once to the realization of what he truly was, and again to his arrest and imprisonment. "I should have seen it," she said one night, lying in their bed, Max holding her hand. The way he treated women. The way he talked about them like possessions. "I should have known." "He fooled everyone," Max replied. "That's what predators do. They're good at it." Tyler saw the truth. He knew something was wrong. "Tyler's braver than both of us." And Tyler did seem different after that night in the woods. More confident, more certain of himself. He'd faced a monster and survived, had seen his father choose justice over revenge. The bruises on his throat had faded, but the strength they'd left behind remained. The trial wouldn't be for months, maybe longer, but the prosecution was confident. They had Kelly's testimony. They had the evidence from the warehouse and Clyde's house. They had Max's documentation and the testimony of Martha Gill and Andy Morrison and a dozen other people who'd seen Clyde's suspicious behavior over the years. Most importantly, they had 8 bodies recovered from properties Clyde owned. 8 families who could finally have closure, even if that closure came with unbearable grief. Clyde Sullivan was denied bail. Too much evidence, too much flight risk. He sat in county jail awaiting trial, his real estate empire crumbling, his reputation destroyed, his freedom gone forever. One afternoon, Agent Terry called Max to ask if he'd testify at trial about the investigation and finding Kelly. Of course, Max said. Whatever you need. For what it's worth, Kent, you did good work. Unconventional, maybe illegal in places, but good work. Ever consider law enforcement? Max laughed. I'm a furniture maker, Agent Terry. I like working with my hands and seeing something solid when I'm done. I'll leave the detective work to you. After hanging up, Max went out to his workshop. The cherrywood dining table sat finished in the center of the room, perfect and complete. The client had canceled the order after the news broke. Apparently, being associated with the man who'd caught a serial killer was bad for business in certain circles. Max didn't mind. He'd keep the table for his own family. He ran his hand along the smooth surface, feeling the grain under his fingers, and thought about how much had changed in a month. He'd started this job to feed his family, to build things that lasted. He'd ended it by tearing down a monster. Tyler appeared in the doorway. Dad? Mom says dinner's ready. Coming, buddy. They walked back to the house together, and Max noticed Tyler was walking taller now, more confident. His son had learned an important lesson, that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. That strength came in many forms. That monsters could be defeated, even by ordinary people with the courage to try. As Max sat down to dinner with his family, Caroline's bruises finally fading, Tyler laughing at something on his phone, the evening sun casting warm light through the windows. He felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Clyde Sullivan was behind bars. Kelly Barrett was free. 8 families had answers. And Max Kent, furniture maker, had proven that you didn't need to be a detective or a superhero to make a difference. You just needed to care enough to act, to be smart enough to plan, and to be brave enough to see it through. The cherrywood table sat in his workshop, a reminder that good craftsmanship took time, patience, and attention to detail. Max had built a case against Clyde the same way he built furniture, one piece at a time, each fitted perfectly to the next, until the whole was stronger than any individual part. And it had held. 3 months later, Max stood in the courthouse hallway, adjusting his tie, still uncomfortable in formal clothes, while the jury deliberated. The trial had lasted 3 weeks, a parade of evidence and testimony that laid bare the full extent of Clyde Sullivan's crimes. The jury had been out for 4 hours. Caroline sat beside him on the bench, her hand in his. Tyler was at school, mercifully spared from having to watch the gruesome details presented in court. But Max had been there for every day, watching Clyde sit at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller somehow, diminished without his expensive suits and his power. Clyde's lawyers had tried everything. They'd argued coercion, argued that Kelly Barrett's testimony was unreliable, argued that the evidence was circumstantial. But there was no arguing with DNA evidence. No arguing with 8 bodies. No arguing with the photographs found in Clyde's house, his own documentation of his crimes, kept like trophies. On the witness stand, Max had described finding Kelly, described the investigation, described Tyler's discovery. Clyde's lawyers had tried to paint him as a vigilante, as someone with a personal vendetta. But Agent Terry's testimony had backed Max up, and Kelly's tearful recounting of her imprisonment had destroyed any sympathy the jury might have had for Clyde. Now they waited. Russ Fitzgerald appeared at the end of the hallway with his wife Tasha. They'd both testified about Sarah, about the 11 years of not knowing, about the small relief of finally being able to bury their daughter. Any word? Russ asked. Max shook his head. Not yet. They sat together in tense silence. Other families of victims filled the hallway, all of them waiting for the same thing, justice. Finally, a bailiff emerged. Jury's coming back. The courtroom filled quickly. Max, Caroline, Russ, Tasha, and dozens of others who'd been touched by Clyde's evil packed the gallery. Clyde was let in, and Max noticed he didn't look at anyone, kept his eyes straight ahead. The jury filed in. Max tried to read their faces but couldn't. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." Max held his breath. "On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Sarah Fitzgerald, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Russ collapsed against Tasha, both of them crying. The judge banged his gavel for order. "On the charge of kidnapping and false imprisonment of Kelly Barrett, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Abigail Neal, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 8 counts of murder. Multiple counts of kidnapping. Assault." The list went on and on. Clyde sat motionless at the defense table, his face blank. His lawyers looked defeated. When the judge asked if Clyde had anything to say before sentencing, he stood slowly. "I built this town," he said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "I provided jobs, housing, opportunity. I made this place what it is. And you're all so eager to destroy me based on the word of a lying girl and a jealous son-in-law." "Mr. Sullivan," the judge said coldly, "you'll have your chance to appeal. Right now, I'm sentencing you to 8 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, plus an additional 90 years for the kidnapping and assault charges. You'll spend the rest of your natural life in prison. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none." The bailiffs moved to take Clyde away. He turned to look at the gallery, his eyes finding Max. For a moment, their gazes locked. Max saw no remorse there, no regret. Just hatred and the bitter knowledge that he'd been beaten by someone he'd considered beneath him. Max held that gaze steadily until Clyde was led away through the side door, disappearing from view for the last time. Then it was over. 8 life sentences. Justice. As much as justice could be served when 8 women were dead and countless families were shattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Max gave a brief statement, thanking the FBI and local police, thanking the jury, thanking Kelly Barrett for her bravery in testifying. Then he and Caroline pushed through the crowd to their truck. "You did it," Caroline said as they drove away. "You really did it. We did it. All of us." That evening, Max grilled steaks in the backyard while Tyler played basketball in the driveway, the sound of the ball bouncing a comforting rhythm. Caroline sat on the porch steps, watching them both. Max thought about the journey from that night 4 months ago, when Tyler had screamed and Max had run inside to find Clyde threatening his son. So much had changed. They'd lost Caroline's father, though really, he'd never been the man they thought he was. They'd gained something too, the knowledge that they were strong enough to face evil and win. "Dad," Tyler called. "Think fast." The basketball sailed toward Max. He caught it and fired back a perfect bounce pass. Tyler grinned and took a shot, the ball swishing through the net. "Nice," Max called. They played horse until the steaks were done, and then the 3 of them ate dinner together at the cherrywood table Max had moved from the workshop into their dining room. It was too nice to leave out there, Caroline had said. And besides, they needed something beautiful to replace the table where Clyde had once sat and judged them all. As the evening stretched into night and Tyler headed upstairs to do homework, Caroline and Max sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Tyler hadn't looked in that room?" Caroline asked. "If he'd never found that box?" "Every day," Max admitted. "How many more women would Clyde have hurt? How long before he got careless or someone else noticed?" "You saved lives, Max. Not just Kelly, but whoever would have been next." Max thought about that. Kelly was thriving now, in therapy but healing. She'd started college online and was planning to study criminal justice. "So I can help other people like Agent Terry helped me," she'd told Max when they'd spoken last week. The other families were healing too, as much as they could. Russ and Tasha had finally held Sarah's funeral, had finally said goodbye properly. The other 7 families had done the same. It wasn't closure. Max had learned that closure was a myth when it came to this kind of loss, but it was something. Knowledge, certainty, the ability to stop hoping and start grieving. And Clyde Sullivan was in a cell where he'd stay until he died, finally powerless, finally contained. "I keep thinking about what you said that night," Caroline said. About building a case like you build furniture. One piece at a time. It was the only way I knew how to do it. Most people would have just called the police and hoped for the best. Most people's sons weren't threatened by a serial killer. Caroline leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for protecting us. For not giving up. Max wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. Always. 6 months after the trial, on a sunny Saturday morning, Max was in his workshop putting the finishing touches on a custom bookshelf when Jerome Holden stopped by. Got something for you, Jerome said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. What is it? Recognition. The FBI wants to formally acknowledge your role in the Sullivan case. Agent Terry specifically requested you for a civilian commendation. Max looked at the official letter inside. It used words like exceptional dedication and invaluable assistance and exemplary citizenship. That's nice, Max said, genuinely touched. Nice? Max, you helped catch a serial killer. People are going to remember this. I'd rather they remember the women Clyde hurt. They're the ones who deserve to be remembered. Jerome smiled. You know, when you first asked me to pull those missing persons files, I thought you were crazy. Now I think you're probably the sanest person I know. After Jerome left, Max hung the letter on his workshop wall, next to his business license and the photo of him, Caroline, and Tyler from last Christmas. Recognition was fine, but what mattered more was the work. The furniture he built, the life he was creating for his family, the fact that Tyler could sleep at night without nightmares now. That afternoon, Patrick Forbes came by with news that Sullivan Properties had been sold in bankruptcy proceedings. The new owners were keeping most of the staff, including Rich Shepard, but they'd offered Max his old job back at a significant raise. I'm good, Max told Patrick. Got more furniture orders than I can handle right now. Apparently, people like buying from the guy who caught Clyde Sullivan. Not how I wanted to get famous, but I'll take it. Patrick laughed. Fair enough. Hey, Max. Thanks for trusting me with the investigation. Not many people would have put that kind of faith in a PI they barely knew. You came through when it mattered. That's what counts. As the sun set that evening, Max stood in his driveway and looked at his house, the home he'd built with his own hands, board by board, the place where his family was safe. He thought about how different his life might have been if Tyler hadn't been brave enough to look in that box, if Max hadn't been smart enough to investigate carefully, if any of them had backed down when Clyde tried to intimidate them. But they hadn't backed down. They'd fought, and they'd won. Tyler came out of the house bouncing a basketball. Dad, up for a game? Always. They played one-on-one in the driveway as the stars came out, and Max let Tyler win by 2 points. His son had earned it. They all had. Later, after Tyler went to bed and Caroline fell asleep beside him, Max lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. In 4 months, he'd gone from a simple furniture maker to someone who'd taken down a monster. He'd used every skill he had. His patience, his attention to detail, his ability to see how pieces fit together, not to build something, but to tear down something evil. And in the end, that was worth more than any table or chair or bookshelf he'd ever create. Max closed his eyes and finally, truly slept peacefully, knowing that Clyde Sullivan would never hurt anyone again. The monster was caged. The victims were avenged. And Max Kent, furniture maker, could go back to building things that lasted. 1 year after Clyde Sullivan's conviction, the town dedicated a memorial garden for the victims. 8 trees, one for each woman whose body had been recovered, planted in a circle around a central fountain. Plaques bore their names: Sarah Fitzgerald, Abigail Neal, Lisa Brennan, and 5 others. Max stood with Caroline and Tyler at the dedication ceremony, surrounded by the victims' families. Russ Fitzgerald had organized it, had raised the money, had designed the garden himself. It was beautiful and peaceful, a place to remember. Kelly Barrett gave a short speech about survival and strength, about the importance of never giving up hope. She looked healthy now, had gained back the weight she'd lost, and her eyes were clear and focused. When it was Max's turn to speak, he kept it brief. These women deserved better than what happened to them. They deserved to live their lives, to chase their dreams, to grow old. We can't give them that, but we can remember them. We can honor them, and we can make sure that what happened to them matters. Afterward, people came up to shake his hand, to thank him. Max accepted it gracefully, though he still felt strange being treated like a hero. He'd just been a father protecting his son, a man seeking justice. As the crowd dispersed, a young woman approached. She looked maybe 23, with nervous eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Mr. Kent? I'm Tracy Bennett. You don't know me, but my sister was Abigail Neal." "Abby." Max remembered Martha Gill's stories about the sweet girl next door. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I wanted to thank you." After Abby disappeared, everyone said she probably just ran away. Said she was irresponsible, immature. But she wasn't. She was kind and smart, and she would never have just left. Tracy's voice broke. "You proved that. You gave her back her dignity. You gave our family the truth. That matters more than you know." Max didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded. Tracy squeezed his hand. "If you ever need anything at all, you call me. I mean it." After she left, Caroline put her arm around Max's waist. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just, it's a lot." "It is. But it's also over. You can move on now." Could he? Max thought about the cherrywood table in their dining room. Thought about the orders stacked up in his workshop. Thought about Tyler's laughter and Caroline's smile and the normal, beautiful life they were rebuilding. "Yeah," he said. "I think I can." They drove home as a family, Tyler chattering about his upcoming basketball tournament, Caroline planning next week's meals, Max listening and content. His hands had built furniture for 15 years, solid and lasting work. But in 4 intense months, those same hands had helped tear down a predator and bring justice to 8 families. Both were good work. Both mattered. But Max was happy to return to the furniture. That night, Max sat in his workshop, the familiar smell of wood and varnish comforting. He had an order for a custom dresser due in 2 weeks, and he wanted to get started on the frame. But first, he opened his laptop and looked at the folder labeled Sullivan Case. Inside were all the files, all the evidence, all the documentation he'd built. He'd kept copies despite Agent Terry suggesting he delete them, because he wanted to remember. Not the horror of what Clyde had done, but the process of stopping him. The careful investigation, the patient collection of evidence, the strategic planning. Because someday, another monster might emerge. Another Clyde Sullivan hiding behind a respectable facade. And if that happened, Max wanted people to know that ordinary citizens could make a difference. That you didn't need a badge or special training to fight evil. You just needed to care, to be smart, and to refuse to back down. He closed the laptop and picked up his pencil to sketch the dresser design. The past year had taught him many things, but the most important was this. Strength came in many forms. Building furniture was strength. Protecting your family was strength. Standing up to evil was strength. And Max Kent had all 3. As he worked late into the night, the sound of his pencil scratching against paper, he felt truly at peace for the first time since that terrible evening when Tyler had screamed. The monster was defeated. The victims were remembered. Justice had been served. And Max was exactly where he belonged. In his workshop, building things that would last, creating beauty from raw materials, using his hands and his mind to make the world a little better, one piece at a time. Outside, the stars shone bright over the quiet town. Inside, a furniture maker worked on his latest creation, the past behind him, the future full of possibility. And in a maximum security prison 3 states away, Clyde Sullivan sat in a cell, powerless and forgotten, exactly where he deserved to be. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.